This year I spent the entire winter building this sauna out of pallets and other reused materials for right around 50 bucks. Today we finally get to test it out, but there's one more thing I need to add before we can get sweating. I've got this nice pallet and I'm going to use it to build a couple benches, but first we got to rip it in half. Any finished person will tell you that you've got to have a bench in a sauna like this or you're just not going to get high enough up to get a good sweat going. I definitely don't want to disrespect the fins, so I'm going to make this happen. After ripping the pallet in half, I used a spare 2x4 to get some leverage and pull these last few boards off. I could have just blasted them off with a hammer, but I'm going to reuse them, so I want them to be in good condition. Next, I used a leftover pallet stringer and some of the extra pallet nails to make this second section into another bench. I'm all about doing things as easy as possible, and this is one of the best ways I've found to make two little platforms like this. But those gaps are a little far apart, and I don't want my butt hanging through them, so we got to fill those in. Luckily, we have all these extra boards from the bottom of the pallet, so we're going to rip them to size on the table saw, and they should work perfectly. The smallest gap was about 2.5 inches, so I was able to get a bunch of boards to work with, and I didn't even have to take any nails out. Now that is being efficient. You can probably guess what's going to happen here, but I'll show you anyway. We're going to take these slats, put them in between these gaps, and just nail them in with a couple pallet nails. When we're done, we should have two benches, equally sized, fairly sturdy, perfect fit for a dirtbag sauna. But wait, what about that last hole? Oh, don't worry, I was planning ahead. These benches are almost perfect, but they're still a little too long, so the end has to come off anyway. This is one thing I love about working with pallets. If you can figure out how to use them in their native form without making too many modifications, you can save yourself a lot of time and labor. Look at those. They're gorgeous. The last thing was to take a couple more pallet stringers and add some more support on the ends. This is going to make the benches a little bit more sturdy just so nobody falls through and dies, and I'm going to use them to attach the benches inside the sauna. And with that, we're pretty much ready to go. The only consideration with the install was I wanted the bench to be high enough to catch the heat, but low enough so my head wasn't banging against the ceiling. Because I put this cool skylight in, I was able to put them a little higher than usual. If you're building one of these yourself, the best way I found to get this dimension is just to sit down in a chair and measure your butt to the top of your head, then add a couple inches. The top one felt great, and that's the most important anyway, so the bottom one I just eyeballed somewhere between that and the floor. I'm all about the eyeball method. If I had it my way, my measuring tape would sit around and rust in my shop. The benches felt totally secure nailed against the wall. I didn't need any more support, so it was time to fire it up. Because the stove is kind of half in and out of the sauna, I got a really good fire going first, then I moved all the coals to the front. We've been getting a lot of rain, so the cob on top needed to steam off a bit, but there was a ton of heat coming out of the flue even with such a short stack. This was quite a journey to get to this point, and I was kind of nervous that it wasn't going to work. What if the stove didn't put out enough heat? What if the insulation didn't hold the temp inside? What if the skylight just let the heat bleed right through the glass? But to my joy and surprise, it was super warm inside, and look how hot the stove was getting. I kept throwing a bunch of water on the rocks in the back, and it would steam off within minutes. A lot of folks have been saying I should weld a little rock holder to the top of the stove, which I think I should, because you can see how the water just rolls right off the stove when it's hot. But despite that, there was a lot of steam coming off that thing. Pretty soon the glass on the door had fogged up and water drips were starting to move down it, and the skylight glass had warmed up and was starting to condensate. The natural light brings brightness into the sauna, and I could sit and just watch the trees move. Within about half an hour, I was starting to roast pretty good. I could feel sweat coming down off my forehead, and all the little aches and pains in my body started to detense. As I sat there cooking, I started to feel this insane sense of accomplishment and relief. It smelled like wood and earth. Nothing caught fire. All the things I was worried about didn't end up manifesting, and it was actually working. This little guy flew out of the stove while I was steaming, and I wanted to save him because I love moths. If you guys have any questions, something I didn't cover, you can drop them in the comments, but this project's basically done and I'm ready to move on to something else. There is one more final touch I've got to make, and that video will be coming out next week. If you guys want to support my content, you can do that by liking and sharing this video, or I've got a Patreon and some merch online. The final sauna video is coming out next week, so leave a comment with what we should build next.